Alarms tore through the narrow cabin of the scout ship as 3 enemy vessels closed in from the dark side of a nameless moon. Princess Valith Dracaray gripped the edge of her control panel while the ship shook under another wave of impact. Sparks burst from a broken conduit near her feet, and the smell of scorched metal filled the air. "Report," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Shields at 20%, answered Kester Vane, her guard captain, from the seat beside her. "They are not trying to disable us. They are trying to end this." Valith did not need him to say more. She already knew who had sent the ships. Lord Dravik Korin had made no secret of his hatred for her family, and with the old Empress growing weaker each day, he saw this as his final chance to remove the true heir before she could ever sit on the throne. The ship lurched again. A warning light flashed red across the console. Kester fought with the controls, guiding the ship into a tight spin that sent them plunging toward a small blue planet ahead. It was not their destination. It was barely a blip on any Imperial star chart, but it was the only chance they had. "Hold on," Kester shouted, and then the ship hit the atmosphere. Fire wrapped around the hull as they tore through the sky. The 3 enemy ships broke off, unwilling to follow into a planet's gravity well without proper shielding, but the damage was already done. Valith felt the ship break apart beneath her, panel by panel, as it plummeted toward the surface. She caught one last glimpse of green hills and a wide, calm ocean before everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, pain radiated through her side, and the world around her smelled of grass and rain. The wreck of her ship lay scattered across a hillside, smoke rising from broken pieces of metal that no human eye would recognize. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in her ribs stopped her. Kester was nowhere in sight. She called his name, but only the wind answered. Night fell quickly on this unfamiliar world. Valith dragged herself toward a cluster of trees, using the last of her strength to hide the glowing wreckage beneath broken branches. Her communicator was crushed beyond repair. She was alone, injured, and stranded on a planet she knew nothing about. It was Elias Reyes who found her the next morning. He was walking his usual path along the hills behind his family's old farmhouse, checking on a fence that had come loose in the storm the night before, when he saw something glinting through the trees. At first he thought it was a piece of a plane that had gone down. Planes sometimes flew low near the coast, and storms could be unforgiving. But as he came closer, his steps slowed. The wreckage did not look like any aircraft he had ever seen. The metal held strange patterns, almost like a language etched into its surface, and colors that shifted faintly, even in the dim morning light. Then he saw her. She lay against the base of a large oak tree, her clothing torn, her skin pale, and a thin cut running along her temple. Her hair was a shade of pale silver blue that no dye could ever create naturally. Elias froze for a moment, uncertain if what he was seeing was real. Then her eyes fluttered open, and he saw them clearly, a deep violet that held no resemblance to any human he had ever met. He should have run. Later, when he thought back on that morning, he would wonder why he hadn't. Instead, he knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" Valith stared at him, her mind working quickly despite the pain. She understood his words, thanks to the translation implant behind her ear, a standard feature for any bloodborne royal traveling beyond Imperial space. She studied his face, searching for any sign of threat, but found none. Only concern. "Please," she managed to say, her voice hoarse, "do not tell anyone I am here." Elias blinked, surprised she spoke his language at all. "Okay," he said slowly. "But you're hurt. You need help." "No hospitals," she said firmly, wincing as she tried to sit up. "No authorities. If anyone learns I am here, they will find me, and they will not be kind." Elias glanced at the strange wreckage scattered across the hillside, then back at her. Whatever this was, it was far beyond anything he understood. But the fear in her eyes was real, and it convinced him more than any strange technology could. "I have a place," he said. "It's quiet. No one comes around much. You can rest there until we figure out what's going on." He helped her to her feet, letting her lean against him as they made their way down the hill. Every step seemed to cost her greatly, but she did not complain. By the time they reached his farmhouse, she was nearly unconscious again, and Elias carried her the rest of the way. He laid her down on the small bed in his guest room and did what he could to treat her wounds. He had no idea what her body needed, what medicine might harm her, or what might help. He simply cleaned the cut on her head, wrapped a bandage around her ribs as gently as he could, and covered her with a blanket. For 2 days, she drifted in and out of sleep. Elias stayed close, bringing water and simple food, though she ate very little. He watched her from the doorway sometimes, wondering who she truly was, and where she had come from. He noticed the strange bracelet on her wrist that pulsed faintly with a soft light, and the way her skin seemed to catch the sunlight differently than his own. On the 3rd morning, she woke fully alert. She sat up slowly, testing her ribs, relieved to feel the pain had eased. She found Elias in the small kitchen, making tea. "You have questions," she said, startling him. He turned, surprised to see her standing, steadier than before. "A few," he admitted. "My name is Velith," she said. "I come from a place very far from here. My people are not from this world." Elias set the kettle down carefully. Somewhere in his mind, he had already guessed as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a strange chill through him. Are you here to hurt anyone?" he asked. "No," she said quickly. "I was running. Someone tried to kill me before I crashed here. If they learn I survived, they will try again." Elias studied her, searching for any hint of deception, but found only exhaustion and honesty. "Why would anyone want to hurt you?" Velith hesitated. Explaining her position, her bloodline, and the politics of an empire spanning countless star systems to a man who had likely never left his own small town seemed an impossible task. Instead, she chose simplicity. "Where I come from, my family holds great power. Not everyone wants us to keep it. I am next in line to inherit that power, and there are those who would rather see me gone than allow that to happen." Elias poured 2 cups of tea, more out of habit than anything else, and set one before her. "That sounds like a heavy thing to carry." "It is," she said quietly, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. It was such a small, simple gesture, yet it felt foreign and comforting all at once. "You have already done more for me than anyone has in a long time, and you do not even know who I truly am." "You needed help," Elias said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "That's enough for me." Velith looked at him for a long moment. In her world, kindness was rarely given without expectation of return. Every gesture, every favor, came with a hidden price, a political motive, or a calculated risk. But this man had brought a stranger into his home, tended her wounds, and asked for nothing in return, except her honesty. Over the following days, Velith remained hidden at the farmhouse, while her strength returned. Elias kept his routine as normal as possible, tending his small fields and animals, careful not to draw attention from neighbors who might wonder about unfamiliar sounds or lights near his property. At night, they would sit together on the porch, and she would ask him questions about his world, fascinated by its simplicity, while he asked about hers, captivated by its vastness. She told him about the shifting star maps her people used to navigate the void, about the great council chambers, where decisions shaping entire systems were made, and about the bloodline rights that granted her family their unique standing among the stars. Elias listened with quiet wonder, never once treating her as strange or frightening, only as someone far from home who needed a steady hand. In turn, Elias spoke of small things that felt profound to her, the way rain smelled before a storm, the quiet satisfaction of fixing something broken with his own hands. The comfort of routine, waking early, working the land, and falling asleep to the sound of crickets outside his window. To Velith, whose life had always been shaped by duty and expectation, these simple pleasures felt like discovering an entirely new form of freedom. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, casting long golden light across the porch, Velith turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You have never once asked what I could offer you," she said. "Not protection, not wealth, nothing. Why is that?" Elias considered the question carefully before answering. "Where I come from, helping someone isn't supposed to come with a price tag," he said. "You needed somewhere safe. I had that to give. Seemed simple enough to me." She smiled softly, something rare and unguarded. "Where I come from, nothing is ever that simple." As the days passed, Velith's communicator implant, though damaged, began picking up faint signals. Her people were searching for her. A rescue fleet had likely been dispatched the moment her ship went dark on Imperial sensors, and it would only be a matter of time before they traced her location to this quiet corner of a distant, unlisted planet. She should have felt relief at the thought of rescue. Instead, sitting beside Elias as the stars emerged overhead, she felt something entirely unexpected, a reluctance to leave. She glanced at him, watching the calm way he studied the night sky, utterly unaware that somewhere among those same stars, an empire waited for her return, an empire that would never understand why. For the first time in her life, she wished a rescue could wait just a little longer. The signal grew stronger with each passing night, a faint pulse only Valeth could sense through the damaged implant behind her ear. She said nothing to Elias at first, unwilling to disturb the strange peace that had settled between them. But on the seventh night, as thunder rumbled somewhere far off across the hills, she knew she could not stay silent any longer. "They are close," she said, standing at the window, while Elias latched the shutters against the coming storm. "My people. The signal from my communicator has been growing stronger. A search fleet has entered this system." Elias paused, his hand still on the latch. "How close?" "Days, perhaps less," she said. "When they arrive, they will scan the entire planet for any trace of Imperial technology. It will not take them long to find this house." He turned to face her fully. "And when they find you, what happens then?" Valeth hesitated. "They will take me home. My mother, the Empress, is gravely ill. The succession must be settled soon, and I am the only heir. I am expected to return, choose a consort from one of the allied houses, and prepare to take the throne." "A consort," Elias repeated slowly, testing the unfamiliar weight of the word. "A partner in rule," she explained. "Chosen for political alliance, for strength, for standing among the great houses, not for anything as simple as feeling." Elias nodded, though something in his chest tightened at the thought of her returning to a life so far removed from the quiet days they had shared. "Sounds lonely," he said. "It is what is expected of me," Valeth said, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. The following morning brought an unexpected complication. Nora Fenwick, the elderly widow who lived on the neighboring property, arrived at the farmhouse gate with a basket of fresh bread, as she often did when she noticed smoke rising from Elias's chimney more frequently than usual. "Elias, dear," she called from outside. "I saw lights out past the hill the other night. Thought maybe you were having trouble with the old barn again." Elias stepped outside quickly, closing the door behind him to keep Valeth out of sight. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Fenwick. Just doing some repairs." Nora squinted past him toward the house, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "You've been keeping to yourself more than usual. Everything all right with you?" "Never better," Elias said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for the bread." She lingered a moment longer, clearly unconvinced, before finally nodding and making her way back down the path. Elias exhaled slowly, relief washing over him, though he knew such close calls could not continue indefinitely. Sooner or later, someone would notice something they could not explain away. Inside, Valeth had been listening from behind the curtain, her expression thoughtful. "Your neighbor is observant," she said, as he stepped back inside. "She means well," Elias replied. "But you're right. It's getting harder to keep this quiet." That evening, as they sat together going over what little remained of Valeth's damaged equipment, her communicator suddenly flared to life with a burst of static, followed by a clear, mechanical voice speaking in her native tongue. Elias could not understand the words, but he saw the shift in Valeth's expression immediately, a mixture of relief and something closer to dread. "It is Captain Rowan Ashcombe," she said, translating quickly. "He commands my mother's rescue fleet. They have located the wreckage of my ship and are preparing to send a landing party to search the surrounding area. How long do we have?" "Hours, not days," she said, standing quickly. "I must retrieve anything from the wreck that could reveal you were involved in my survival. If they find evidence that a human sheltered me, it could create complications neither of us want." Elias grabbed his jacket. "Then let's go now, before it gets dark." They moved quickly through the fields and up the familiar hillside, retracing the path Elias had walked the very first morning he found her. The wreckage remained largely undisturbed, hidden beneath the branches Valeth had pulled over it days before. Together, They worked to clear away any trace of human involvement, gathering torn fabric from Elias's old shirts that Velith had used as makeshift bandages, and covering deep footprints leading toward the farmhouse. As they worked, a low hum echoed across the sky. Elias looked up to see a sleek, silver aircraft descending toward the hillside, its shape unlike anything built on Earth. It moved with unnatural silence, hovering just above the grass before easing down a short distance away. "That's them," Velith said, straightening. A ramp lowered from the ship, and several figures emerged, dressed in fitted gray uniforms that shimmered faintly under the fading daylight. At their center walked a tall man with sharp, composed features, his dark eyes scanning the wreckage with practiced precision. Elias recognized him immediately as someone accustomed to command. "Princess Velith," the man said, relief evident in his voice as he approached. "We feared the worst when we found the wreckage." "Captain Ashcombe," Velith greeted him, straightening her posture into something more regal, more distant than the woman Elias had come to know over the past week. "I survived the crash, though not without difficulty." Rowan's gaze shifted toward Elias, curiosity flickering behind his composed expression. "And this?" "This is Elias Reyes," Velith said carefully. "He found me after the crash, and ensured my survival. Without his assistance, I would not have lived to see your arrival." Rowan studied Elias for a long moment, clearly recalculating the situation. "A local inhabitant," he said slowly. "Unusual, but not unprecedented. We are grateful for your assistance to the princess." "She needed help," Elias said simply, echoing the same quiet conviction he had shown from the very first night. Rowan nodded, though his attention quickly returned to Velith. "We must return to the fleet immediately. Your mother's condition has worsened in your absence. The convocation grows restless without a clear successor prepared to take the throne." Velith's expression tightened at the mention of her mother's illness. She glanced back at Elias, torn between the pull of duty and the quiet, unfamiliar ache of leaving behind the only place she had ever felt free of expectation. "Give us a moment," she said to Rowan, who nodded and stepped back toward the ship, allowing them privacy. "You're leaving," Elias said quietly, though it was not truly a question. "I must," Velith replied. "My mother needs me. My people need clarity on the succession. I cannot ignore that responsibility, no matter how much I might wish otherwise." Elias nodded, forcing calm into his voice despite the tightening in his chest. "I understand. But I do not wish for this to be a farewell," Velith continued, surprising him. "In the short time I have known you, I have learned more about kindness and about myself than in all my years among the great houses. I do not wish to lose that." "What are you saying?" Elias asked carefully. "I am asking you to come with me," she said, her voice steady despite the enormity of the request. "Not as an obligation, not as part of some political arrangement, but because I do not wish to return to that life without you beside me." Elias stared at her, the weight of her words settling slowly, leaving behind everything familiar, his farm, his quiet life, the only world he had ever known, for a future among the stars filled with uncertainty and unfamiliar danger, was no small decision. "If I go with you," he said slowly, "what happens to me there? I don't know your customs, your politics, any of it." "You would face challenges," she admitted honestly. "My people are not accustomed to outsiders, and there are those who will resent your presence deeply. But I would not ask you to face that alone." Elias looked toward the farmhouse behind them, the quiet fields he had tended his entire life, then back at Velith, whose violet eyes held a rare vulnerability beneath their usual composure. "All right," he said finally. "I'll come with you." Relief washed visibly over Velith's features, though she quickly composed herself as Rowan approached once more. "Princess, the fleet awaits your command. We will be departing shortly," Velith said. "Elias Reyes will be accompanying us." Rowan's brow lifted slightly, though he offered no argument. "As you wish, Princess. I will prepare appropriate accommodations aboard the vessel." As they walked toward the waiting ship, Elias glanced back one final time at the farmhouse, silhouetted against the darkening sky, the only home he had ever known. He felt a quiet ache at leaving it behind, yet beside him walked a woman whose presence had already reshaped his understanding of the universe, and whatever challenges awaited them among the stars, He found himself steadying his resolve to face them together. The ramp closed behind them with a soft hydraulic hiss, sealing away the familiar sounds of Earth, the wind through the fields, the distant call of birds settling for the night, replaced instead by the low hum of advanced machinery and the quiet murmur of an unfamiliar crew preparing for departure. Valeth led him through narrow corridors lined with soft, pulsing lights, past crew members who paused to offer respectful bows before continuing their duties, their curious glances lingering a moment too long on the human walking beside their princess. Elias tried to appear calm, though every unfamiliar sight, sound, and sensation reminded him just how far from home he now stood. They reached a small viewing chamber near the front of the ship, its wide window revealing the curve of the Earth, shrinking steadily below them as the vessel climbed higher into the darkening sky. Elias watched in silence, torn between wonder and quiet grief, as the only planet he had ever known grew smaller and smaller until it became little more than a pale blue marble suspended in the vast darkness. "It does not get easier," Valeth said softly, standing beside him. "Leaving behind what you have always known." "No," Elias agreed, "but I don't regret it." She turned to study him carefully. "You may, in time. What awaits us will not be simple." "Nothing worth doing ever is," he replied, managing a small, steady smile, despite the uncertainty churning quietly beneath his calm exterior. As the ship broke free of Earth's atmosphere and turned toward the vast expanse of stars stretching endlessly ahead, Valeth allowed herself a rare, unguarded moment of hope. Whatever challenges awaited them among her people, whatever resistance her choice would inevitably provoke, she found herself steadier, more certain, with Elias standing quietly beside her. Somewhere far ahead, across countless stars and silent void, an empire waited, unaware that its future was about to change, in ways none of its ancient houses could have ever predicted. The imperial capital of Threnholm rose from the surface of its homeworld like a mountain range, built by hands far more precise than nature's own. Towers of pale stone and gleaming metal stretching so high, their peaks vanished into low clouds. Elias pressed his palm against the cool glass of the shuttle window as they descended, unable to look away from the sight below. Nothing in his life had prepared him for a city built across the sky itself. Bridges connecting towers hundreds of stories tall, ships gliding silently between them, like schools of fish moving through still water. "It is a great deal to take in," Valeth said, watching him carefully. "That's putting it lightly," Elias murmured. The shuttle landed on a wide platform near the base of the tallest spire, where a small formation of guards in ceremonial armor stood waiting. Among them stood a woman with silver hair pulled into a severe braid, her expression unreadable as the ramp lowered. "Chancellor Aldrin Voss," Valeth said quietly to Elias. "One of the few members of the convocation who has always supported my claim to the throne. Trust him, but choose your words carefully around everyone else." Aldrin approached with a measured bow. "Princess, we feared the worst when your ship went dark. Your mother will be relieved to see you safely returned." "How is she?" Valeth asked. "Weaker," Aldrin admitted. "The healers say her time grows short. The convocation grows anxious, without a settled succession, and I fear certain houses have grown bold in your absence." His gaze shifted toward Elias, curiosity mixing with something more cautious. "And this is the human you mentioned in your transmission." "Elias Reyes," Valeth confirmed. "He saved my life after the crash." Aldrin studied Elias for a long moment before offering a respectful nod. "Then the Empire owes you a debt, young man, though I suspect not everyone here will see it that way." They were led through wide corridors lined with tall windows overlooking the sprawling city below, past murals depicting the long history of the Dracaray bloodline, ancient battles, ancient alliances, and the sacred bloodline rights said to grant each heir their unique strength. Elias tried to absorb as much as he could, aware that understanding even a fraction of this world's history might prove essential to surviving within it. They found the Empress in a private chamber high above the city, resting upon a raised bed surrounded by soft, glowing lights meant to ease her pain. Isolde Dracaray had once been a formidable presence. Elias could see traces of that strength even now in the sharpness of her gaze, though illness had clearly taken its toll on her once powerful frame. "Valeth!" the Empress said, her voice weak but warm as her daughter approached. You had us all terribly worried. I am sorry, Mother, Valeth said, taking her hand gently. The journey was more difficult than expected. Isolde's eyes shifted toward Elias, studying him with the same sharp intelligence that had guided the Empire for decades. And who is this? This is Elias Reyes, Valeth said. He saved my life when my ship crashed. I have asked him to remain here, at my side, as I prepare to take the throne. A long silence followed, as Isolde considered this, her gaze never leaving Elias's face. A human, she said finally. Unprecedented, but perhaps not unwelcome. Tell me, young man, do you understand what you have stepped into? Not entirely, Elias admitted honestly, but I intend to learn. Something like approval flickered across Isolde's tired features. Honesty, a rare quality among the houses these days. Perhaps you will do well here after all. Their quiet reunion was interrupted by the arrival of a tall man, dressed in dark, finely tailored robes, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere of the room. Lord Dravik Korin entered without waiting for permission, his sharp eyes settling first on Valeth, then narrowing further as they landed on Elias. Princess Valeth, Dravik said smoothly, though little warmth touched his voice. How fortunate that you survived your ordeal. And who might this be? Surely not the human rumors have already spread across every level of the city.
Lord Korin, Valeth said evenly, refusing to be drawn into open hostility so soon. This is Elias Reyes, my chosen consort.
The room seemed to grow colder at her declaration. Dravik's composed expression cracked briefly, revealing genuine surprise before he mastered himself once more. Consort, he repeated slowly, as though tasting the word for flaws. A bold choice, Princess. One I imagine the Convocation will find difficult to accept. The Convocation will accept whatever choice secures a stable future for this empire, Valeth replied firmly. Dravik's gaze lingered on Elias with open disdain. A primitive world, unallied, untested. You would risk the Empire's future on sentiment rather than strategy? I would risk nothing, Valeth said. Elias has already proven his worth, something your own house has yet to demonstrate in recent years. A flicker of anger crossed Dravik's face before he composed himself once more, offering a shallow bow. We shall see how the Convocation responds to your unconventional choice. With that, he turned and departed, his robes sweeping dramatically behind him. Once he was gone, Aldrin released a slow breath. That went about as well as could be expected. He will not accept this quietly, Valeth said, watching the door where Dravik had disappeared. No, Aldrin agreed. He rarely accepts anything quietly. Over the following days, Elias found himself thrust into a world of unfamiliar customs and rigid formality. Valeth assigned one of her most trusted aides, a sharp, quick-witted woman named Mira Solen, to guide him through the basics of court etiquette, proper forms of address, and the countless unspoken rules that governed interactions among the great houses. Never speak first to a member of the Convocation unless directly addressed, Mira instructed one afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, a rare green space suspended high above the city streets. And never, under any circumstance, admit uncertainty in front of a rival house. They will use any weakness they perceive against you, and by extension, against the princess. That sounds exhausting, Elias admitted. Mira allowed a small, wry smile. You have no idea. Though I will say, most of the court expected someone far less capable of holding a conversation than you have proven to be. Low expectations, then. Extremely low, Mira agreed, her smile widening slightly. Despite Mira's guidance, Elias could not escape the weight of constant scrutiny. Members of the court watched him with open curiosity, some with genuine interest, though many others regarded him with thinly veiled contempt, whispering behind painted fans and raised goblets whenever he passed. He bore it as best he could, reminding himself daily why he had chosen to remain, standing quietly beside Valeth, through formal dinners and tense council meetings alike. One evening, during a formal gathering, meant to introduce Elias more broadly to the assembled houses, a young noblewoman named Lyra Ashworth approached him with an expression of open curiosity rather than hostility, a rare relief among the sea of judgmental stares. "You are the human everyone speaks of," she said, studying him with genuine interest rather than scorn. "That would be me," Elias replied cautiously. "I confess, I expected someone far less composed," Lyra admitted. "Most humans, from what little we know of your world, are said to be quite excitable." Elias allowed a small smile. "I suppose I'm doing my best not to embarrass anyone." "You are doing better than most of the nobles in this room," Lyra said, glancing meaningfully toward a cluster of whispering courtiers nearby. "Pay them no mind. Change frightens people, and you represent quite a significant change." Her words offered small comfort, though the underlying tension within the court remained impossible to ignore. Later that same evening, as Elias stood near the edge of the grand hall observing the unfamiliar rituals of imperial diplomacy, he noticed Dravik speaking quietly with several other nobles near the far corner, their voices low, their expressions calculating. He could not hear their words, but the glances they cast in his direction left little doubt as to their subject. Something was being planned, quietly, carefully, and Elias understood instinctively that whatever it was, it would not favor either himself or Velith. Later that night, he mentioned the exchange to Velith as they walked together, along a quiet balcony, overlooking the sprawling city lights below. "Dravik will not simply accept my choice," Velith said grimly. "He has spent years positioning himself and his allies for influence over the succession. My decision threatens that carefully built position." "What will he do?" "I do not yet know," Velith admitted, "but he is patient and dangerous. We must remain vigilant." As if summoned by their conversation, Mira appeared at the balcony entrance, her expression tense. "Princess, forgive the interruption, but you should know, Lord Corrin has formally petitioned the convocation to review your fitness for succession, citing your choice of consort as evidence of poor judgment unbecoming of an heir." Velith's jaw tightened. "He moves quickly."
"He has clearly been preparing this for some time," Mira added. "The formal hearing has been scheduled within the week."
Elias felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "What happens if the convocation rules against you?" "Then my claim to the throne could be challenged entirely," Velith said quietly, "and Dravik, or one of his allies, could seize the opportunity to advance their own claim instead." The three of them stood in tense silence, the vast city glittering below them, indifferent to the political storm quietly building above its towers. Elias understood now, more clearly than ever, that the choice he had made back on that quiet hillside on Earth had set into motion consequences far greater than either of them had initially realized. "We should prepare," Velith said finally, her voice resolute despite the uncertainty ahead. "Whatever Dravik intends, we will not face it unprepared." Mira nodded firmly. "I will gather what allies remain loyal to your cause, Princess. We have little time to waste." As they parted ways to begin the difficult work ahead, Elias remained a moment longer on the balcony, staring out over the alien city that had so quickly become the unlikely battlefield for his and Velith's future together. Somewhere below, hidden among the glittering towers, powerful forces were already moving against them, and he understood, with quiet certainty, that the days ahead would test them both, in ways neither could yet fully imagine. The grand chamber of the convocation had never before opened its doors to a human, and Elias felt every eye in the vast circular hall settle upon him as he took his place beside Velith. Tiered seating rose in wide rings around the central floor, filled with representatives from every allied house across the empire, their expressions ranging from cautious curiosity to open hostility. At the center of it all stood a raised platform where Lord Dravik Corrin waited, composed and confident, ready to present his formal challenge. "Members of the convocation," Dravik began, his voice carrying easily across the silent chamber, "we gather today to address a matter of grave importance to the future stability of this empire. Princess Velith Dracaray, heir to the throne, has chosen to elevate an outsider, a human from an unallied, primitive world, to the position of consort. I ask this council, is this truly the judgment we wish to entrust with the future of our empire?" Murmurs rippled through the assembled houses. Velith remained perfectly composed beside Elias, though he could feel the tension radiating from her rigid posture. "The princess's judgment has never faltered," Aldrin Voss countered from his seat among the council elders. She survived an assassination attempt and a crash upon an unknown world, and returned to us stronger, not weaker, for the experience. An assassination attempt, Dravik repeated smoothly, conveniently blamed upon unnamed enemies, with no evidence presented to this council. Perhaps the princess's judgment was already compromised before she ever encountered this human. Elias felt his jaw tighten at the implication, though Velith's steady hand briefly touched his arm, a silent reminder to remain composed despite the provocation. "I have evidence," Velith said calmly, stepping forward. "Fragments recovered from my ship's wreckage confirm the weapons used against us originated from technology restricted to House Corrin's private fleet." A tense silence fell across the chamber. Dravik's composed expression flickered, just briefly, before he recovered. "A serious accusation, Princess, without proper verification. Verification which I have already submitted to the Council's independent investigators," Velith said, producing a small data crystal and placing it upon the central podium. "I trust this Council to examine the evidence honestly, rather than dismiss it based on convenience." The council chamber erupted into hushed, urgent conversation as several representatives leaned toward one another, clearly unsettled by the implications. Dravik's gaze hardened as he studied Velith, recalculating his approach. "Even if such evidence proves accurate," he said carefully, "it changes nothing regarding the unsuitability of a human consort. The bloodline rights which grant our royal family their strength have never been tested against such dilution. What guarantee do we have that the sacred inheritance will not be irreparably weakened?" This argument clearly struck a chord among several more traditional members of the council, their expressions shifting toward genuine concern rather than simple political maneuvering. Velith's confidence wavered only slightly before she straightened, prepared to answer. "The bloodline rights are passed through will and intention, not merely blood alone," she said firmly. "History itself proves this. The great Empress Solara took a consort from an allied house with no royal bloodline centuries ago, and her heir became one of the strongest rulers this empire has ever known. A single example does not guarantee consistent results," Dravik countered swiftly. "Then let the council witness a demonstration," Velith said, surprising even Elias beside her. A ripple of confusion spread through the assembled houses. Aldrin leaned forward, concern flickering across his weathered features. "Princess, what are you suggesting?" "The traditional bonding ritual," Velith said steadily, "performed before the full council, to demonstrate the strength of intention between myself and my chosen consort, regardless of bloodline." Dravik's confidence faltered visibly for the first time. The bonding ritual has not been performed publicly in generations. It carries genuine risk, Princess. Should the connection prove weak, it could permanently damage your own standing, and quite possibly your own abilities. "Then let the risk speak for itself," Velith replied evenly. "If my judgment truly has been compromised, let this council witness the failure directly, rather than relying upon rumor and speculation." A tense silence stretched across the chamber as the council members exchanged uncertain glances. Elias felt his pulse quicken, uncertain exactly what this ritual would entail, though he trusted Velith's judgment enough to remain steady beside her. "Very well," Aldrin said finally, glancing toward the other council elders for confirmation. "The council will permit the demonstration, provided both parties consent freely." All eyes turned toward Elias. He met Velith's gaze, searching for any hesitation, finding instead quiet determination and something softer beneath it, trust. "I consent," he said clearly, his voice carrying steadily across the silent chamber. A soft murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled houses at his composure. Velith nodded once, grateful, before turning back toward the council. "Then let us proceed." Guards escorted them toward the center of the chamber, where a circular platform inlaid with intricate silver patterns awaited. Mira appeared briefly at Elias's side, offering hurried, quiet instruction. "The ritual will test the strength of your bond through a shared connection. Remain calm, and focus only on your feelings toward the princess. Nothing else matters in that moment." Elias nodded, steadying his breathing as he stepped onto the platform beside Velith. A soft, pulsing light rose from the silver patterns beneath their feet, gradually intensifying, as an attendant priestess began a slow, rhythmic chant in the ancient language of the bloodline rites. Elias felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, gentle at first, then rapidly intensifying into something far more overwhelming. Images flickered rapidly through his mind, fragments of memory that were not his own, glimpses of Valeth's childhood beneath twin moons, the weight of expectation placed upon her from birth, the quiet loneliness of a life dictated entirely by duty. Beside him, Valeth gasped softly, as she too experienced fragments of his own memories in return, the quiet solitude of his farm, the steady, patient kindness that had defined his simple life, and beneath it all, a genuine, unwavering devotion toward her that required no political motive or hidden agenda. The light beneath their feet flared brilliantly, then steadied into a warm, golden glow that spread outward across the entire chamber floor. Gasps rippled through the assembled council as the ancient priestess lowered her chant, her expression one of genuine astonishment. "The bond is exceptionally strong," the priestess announced, her voice carrying clearly across the stunned silence of the chamber. "Rarely have I witnessed such clarity and strength of connection, regardless of bloodline." Dravik's composed expression finally shattered entirely, disbelief and barely restrained fury flashing across his features. "Impossible," he muttered, though few in the chamber seemed to hear him, over the rising murmur of astonished conversation. Aldrin rose from his seat, addressing the full council. "The demonstration speaks clearly for itself. The princess's judgment, and her chosen bond, prove far stronger than mere bloodline tradition alone." Scattered applause rippled through several sections of the chamber, though Dravik's allies remained notably silent, their expressions dark with barely concealed frustration. Valeth turned toward Elias, her violet eyes shining with quiet relief and something far deeper. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me." "Always," Elias replied softly. Despite the successful demonstration, Dravik was not prepared to concede so easily. As the council began dispersing, he approached Valeth and Elias directly, his composed mask slipping just enough to reveal the depth of his frustration. "This is far from finished, Princess," he said quietly, careful to keep his voice low enough to avoid drawing further attention. "A single demonstration does not erase generations of tradition, nor does it guarantee the Empire's continued stability." "Then perhaps," Valeth replied evenly, "you should focus your efforts on stability, rather than obstruction." Dravik's jaw tightened, though he offered no further response, turning sharply and departing the chamber with several of his allies trailing closely behind. Mira watched him go, her expression thoughtful. "He will not simply accept defeat, Princess," she said quietly once he had gone. "Men like Dravik rarely surrender their ambitions so easily." "I am aware," Valeth admitted. "But today, at least, we have gained valuable ground." As they exited the grand chamber together, Elias felt the weight of the day's events settle heavily upon him, though beneath the exhaustion, a quiet satisfaction remained. Whatever challenges still awaited them, he had proven, both to himself and to an empire of skeptical strangers, that his bond with Valeth was far more than simple sentiment. Yet even as relief settled over them, a quiet unease lingered at the edges of Elias's mind. Dravik's parting words carried a clear promise of further resistance, and something told him their true battle had only just begun. That evening, as Elias reviewed the day's events privately with Mira, she revealed a troubling discovery. "I have been investigating House Corrin's recent activities," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure their privacy. "There are irregularities in their fleet movements around the time of the princess's crash, movements that align suspiciously closely with the attack itself." "You think Dravik was directly involved?" Elias asked. "I believe the evidence suggests exactly that," Mira confirmed. "But proving it definitively before the full council will require far more concrete evidence than fragments and suspicion alone." "Then we find that evidence," Elias said firmly, surprising even himself with his growing resolve. Mira studied him carefully, a small, approving smile forming at the corner of her lips. "The princess chose well," she said quietly. "Very well indeed." Outside, the city lights of Threnholm glittered endlessly beneath the vast night sky, unaware of the quiet storm still brewing carefully behind its shining towers, a storm that would soon test the strength of Valeth and Elias's bond, far beyond anything the council chamber alone could measure. 3 days after the bonding ritual, Mira arrived at Elias's chamber before dawn, her expression tight with urgency. "I have found something," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. Records confirming House Corrin authorized the deployment of 3 unregistered vessels on the exact date of the princess's crash. The registration codes were altered, but not well enough to escape detection entirely. Elias sat up quickly. "Does Valeth know?" "Not yet. I wanted your counsel first. This evidence, while significant, remains circumstantial. Dravik is careful. He will have prepared defenses against exactly this kind of discovery." "Then we need something undeniable," Elias said, thinking quickly. "Someone who was actually there, who can testify directly." Mira's expression grew troubled. "There may be such a person. One of the pilots involved in the attack, a young officer named Callum Ferris, has recently requested reassignment away from House Corrin's fleet. Such requests are rare and often indicate personal conflict with command decisions." "You think he might talk?" "I think it worth investigating," Mira said carefully, "though approaching him directly carries risk. If Dravik learns we suspect his involvement before we have solid proof, he will ensure Callum disappears entirely, along with any evidence he might provide." They brought the information to Valeth immediately, finding her already awake, reviewing reports from across the Empire's outer territories. She listened carefully as Mira explained their discovery, her expression hardening with each new detail. "Dravik's arrogance may finally prove his undoing," she said once Mira finished. "But we must move carefully. Approach Callum Ferris quietly, Mira. Offer him protection in exchange for his testimony, but ensure absolute discretion." "Understood, Princess." As Mira departed to arrange the delicate meeting, Valeth turned to Elias, her expression softening slightly. "You have proven remarkably resourceful these past few days," she said. "I've had good teachers," Elias replied with a small smile. Their quiet moment was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. A young guard entered, breathless. "Princess, forgive the intrusion, but the Empress has taken a sudden turn for the worse. The healers request your presence immediately." Valeth's composed expression cracked instantly with genuine fear. She rushed toward her mother's chamber, Elias following closely behind, weaving quickly through the palace's winding corridors until they reached the Empress's private quarters. Isolde lay pale and weak upon her bed, surrounded by anxious healers monitoring softly glowing instruments. Her breathing came shallow and uneven, though her eyes fluttered open weakly as Valeth approached. "Mother," Valeth whispered, taking her hand gently. "My dear," Isolde managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I fear my time grows shorter than we anticipated." "Do not speak such things," Valeth said, though tears glistened unshed in her eyes. "You will recover." Isolde offered a weak, knowing smile. "We both understand the truth, my daughter. You must prepare yourself, and this empire, for what comes next." Her gaze shifted toward Elias, standing quietly near the doorway. "Come closer, young man." Elias approached cautiously, kneeling beside the bed as Valeth had done. "Empress, protect her," Isolde whispered, her voice weakening further. "Not merely from physical danger, but from the weight of this crown itself. It is a heavier burden than most ever realize." "I will," Elias promised solemnly. Isolde's eyes closed briefly, exhaustion overtaking her, though a faint, peaceful smile remained upon her weathered features. The healers gently ushered Valeth and Elias from the room, allowing the Empress the rest she desperately needed. Outside in the corridor, Valeth finally allowed her composed mask to fall away entirely, grief overwhelming her carefully maintained control. Elias pulled her gently into a quiet embrace, offering silent comfort as she wept softly against his shoulder. "She has always been so strong," Valeth whispered brokenly. "I do not know how to face this empire without her guidance." "You won't have to face it alone," Elias said firmly. "Whatever happens, I'm right here beside you." Their quiet moment was interrupted once more by Mira's urgent arrival, her expression grave. "Princess, forgive the timing, but you must know immediately. Callum Ferris has agreed to testify against House Corrin, but he insists on doing so publicly, before the full convocation, fearing quiet arrangements might leave him vulnerable to retaliation." Valeth wiped her eyes quickly, composure returning through sheer determination. Then we shall arrange precisely that. Summon an emergency session of the convocation immediately. Dravik will not allow this to proceed without resistance, Mira warned. Let him resist, Valeth said firmly. The truth will speak clearly enough, regardless of his objections. The emergency session convened within hours. The grand chamber filled once more with representatives from every allied house, their expressions curious and uncertain at the unusual urgency of the summons. Dravik entered last, his composed exterior betraying nothing, though Elias noticed a subtle tension in his usually confident stride. Callum Ferris stood nervously at the center of the chamber, a young man barely into adulthood, his uniform marking him clearly as a member of House Corrin's private fleet. Aldrin addressed the assembled council solemnly. We gather today to hear testimony directly relevant to the recent allegations against House Corrin, he announced. Officer Callum Ferris has requested this opportunity to speak freely before this council. Dravik's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, though he remained silent, watching carefully as Callum began his testimony. I served under direct orders from Lord Corrin's private command structure, Callum said, his voice trembling slightly despite his obvious determination. 3 months ago, I was among the pilots deployed to intercept Princess Valeth's scout vessel. Our orders were explicit: ensure the ship did not survive the encounter. Gasps rippled audibly through the assembled council. Dravik's composed mask finally cracked entirely, fury flashing openly across his sharp features. Lies, he snapped, rising abruptly from his seat. This boy has clearly been coerced, likely bribed by the princess herself to fabricate these accusations. I have brought physical evidence, Callum continued steadily, ignoring Dravik's outburst entirely. He produced a small data crystal, presenting it to the council elders. Direct communication logs confirming the orders issued, along with my own testimony under truth verification, should the council require additional confirmation. Aldrin accepted the crystal solemnly, passing it immediately to the council's independent verification officers. Tense silence stretched across the chamber, as the data was quickly analyzed, projected clearly, for the entire assembly to witness. The recorded communications left little room for doubt. Dravik's own voice, unmistakable and clear, issuing direct orders for the assassination attempt against Valeth's vessel. The chamber erupted into outraged murmurs, several council members rising from their seats in open condemnation. Lord Dravik Corrin, Aldrin announced gravely once the evidence had been fully presented, you stand formally accused of high treason against the imperial throne and attempted assassination of the rightful heir. Dravik's composed exterior shattered entirely, fury and desperation warring openly across his features. You would believe the fabricated testimony of a single disgruntled officer over the word of an established house? The evidence speaks clearly for itself, Aldrin replied firmly. Guards, escort Lord Corrin into custody pending formal trial before this council. Dravik attempted briefly to protest further, though guards quickly moved to restrain him, his allies watching in stunned silence, clearly unwilling to publicly defend him any further, given the damning evidence presented. As he was led forcibly from the chamber, his gaze locked briefly with Valeth's, pure venomous hatred burning openly in his expression. This is not finished, Princess, he spat furiously. Mark my words. It is finished, Dravik, Valeth replied calmly, though steel remained clear in her voice. Your ambitions have finally cost you everything. Once he had been removed from the chamber, a heavy silence lingered among the assembled council, the gravity of the day's revelations settling slowly across the room. Aldrin addressed the remaining representatives solemnly. This council owes Officer Ferris a debt of gratitude for his courage in coming forward, he said. And Princess Valeth, an apology, for ever doubting her judgment in these difficult matters. Scattered applause slowly built into a more unified, genuine show of support as the assembled houses rose respectfully toward Valeth. She accepted their renewed respect graciously, though her gaze quickly sought out Elias, standing quietly near the chamber's edge, relief and quiet pride evident in his expression. As they finally departed the chamber together, the weight of the day's events settling heavily upon them both, Valeth allowed herself a small, genuine smile. It seems, Elias Reyes, that you have proven far more valuable to this empire than anyone, myself included, could have initially imagined. I just wanted to help, Elias replied simply, echoing once more the quiet conviction that had defined him since that very first morning on a quiet hillside, so impossibly far from where they now stood. Yet even amid their hard-won victory, a quiet unease remained. Somewhere within the depths of the palace, Dravik awaited trial, his allies scattered, but not entirely defeated, and Valeth's mother remained gravely ill, her time growing steadily shorter. Whatever peace they had gained today, Elias understood clearly, the true test of their bond, and of the Empire's future, still lay carefully ahead. 3 weeks passed following Dravik's arrest, weeks marked by careful preparation as the convocation moved toward finalizing Valeth's coronation. Yet peace remained fragile. Word arrived one gray morning that the Empress Isolde had passed quietly in her sleep, surrounded by healers and attendants, her long reign finally reaching its gentle end. Valeth received the news with quiet grief, though the responsibilities of the throne allowed little time for extended mourning. The full weight of the empire now rested upon her shoulders, and with Dravik's trial concluding in disgrace and permanent exile for both him and his closest allies, the path toward her coronation seemed finally clear. Yet on the eve of the ceremony, Mira arrived at their private quarters, with news that shattered the fragile calm they had only just begun to enjoy. "Princess, forgive the late hour," Mira said, her expression tense with barely restrained urgency. "We have discovered something deeply troubling. Dravik's exile was arranged too smoothly. Sensors along the outer transport routes recorded his vessel deviating from its assigned course 3 hours after departure." Valeth's expression hardened instantly. "Where is he now?" "Unknown," Mira admitted grimly, "but we have intercepted fragments of coded communication, suggesting he retains loyal allies, still embedded within the palace itself. Allies prepared to disrupt tomorrow's coronation entirely." "How certain are we of this intelligence?" Elias asked, stepping forward. "Certain enough that I would not risk proceeding with tomorrow's ceremony without additional precautions," Mira said firmly. Valeth paced thoughtfully across the chamber, her mind working quickly through the implications. Canceling the coronation now would only embolden further resistance, suggesting weakness at precisely the moment we can least afford it. "Then we proceed," Elias said, "but prepared for whatever Dravik intends." Valeth nodded slowly, resolve settling firmly across her features. "Mira, quietly increase security throughout the palace, but discreetly. I will not allow fear to overshadow this moment before the Empire." The following morning arrived bright and clear, the grand coronation hall filled beyond capacity with representatives from every corner of the Empire, along with countless citizens gathered within the surrounding plazas, eager to witness the historic event unfolding within Threnholm's ancient walls. Valeth stood at the chamber's entrance, dressed in ceremonial robes of deep violet and silver, the traditional colors of her bloodline. Elias remained close beside her, dressed similarly in formal attire prepared specially for the occasion, though his thoughts remained sharply focused on the potential danger Mira had warned against. As the ceremonial procession began, guards discreetly positioned throughout the hall maintained careful watch over the assembled crowd, though nothing seemed immediately amiss as Valeth proceeded solemnly toward the raised platform at the chamber's center. Aldrin waited at the platform, holding the ancient crown passed down through countless generations of Dracore rulers. As Valeth ascended the final steps, the assembled crowd fell into reverent silence, the weight of the historic moment settling clearly across the chamber. "Princess Valeth Dracore," Aldrin began solemnly, "do you accept the responsibilities entrusted to you by this empire, to rule with wisdom, strength, and unwavering dedication to the well-being of all your people?" "I accept," Valeth replied clearly, her voice carrying steadily across the silent chamber. Just as Aldrin lifted the crown to complete the ceremony, sudden chaos erupted near the chamber's eastern entrance. Several figures dressed in palace guard uniforms revealed concealed weapons, moving swiftly toward the platform with clear, deadly intent. "Protect the princess," Mira shouted urgently, guards scrambling immediately to intercept the sudden threat. Elias reacted instantly, pulling Valeth firmly behind him, as genuine guards clashed swiftly against the disguised attackers. The chamber erupted into panicked chaos, assembled representatives scrambling for safety, as the brief but intense confrontation unfolded near the central platform. Within moments, Loyal palace guards successfully subdued the disguised attackers, though not before one managed to break free, sprinting desperately toward the platform, a concealed blade flashing briefly in his hand. Elias moved instinctively, placing himself firmly between the charging assailant and Valeth. Kester Vane, having recovered fully from their initial crash landing weeks earlier, intercepted the attacker just before he reached striking distance, swiftly disarming him and pinning him firmly to the chamber floor. "Secure him," Kester ordered sharply, guards quickly moving to restrain the remaining attacker. Silence gradually settled once more across the stunned chamber, the brief but intense confrontation leaving everyone visibly shaken. Valeth turned quickly toward Elias, relief flooding her features as she confirmed he remained unharmed. "Are you all right?" she asked urgently. "I'm fine," Elias assured her, though his own heart still pounded rapidly from the sudden confrontation. Guards quickly identified the subdued attackers as remnants of House Corrin's private forces, confirming Mira's earlier warnings of lingering loyalty toward the exiled lord. Aldrin addressed the shaken assembly firmly, determined to restore calm. "This desperate act changes nothing," he announced clearly. "It only further confirms the wisdom of Princess Valeth's judgment, and the depths to which her enemies are willing to sink in their futile resistance." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the recovering crowd, many nobles now regarding Valeth with renewed respect and admiration for the calm strength she had displayed, even amid genuine danger. She turned back toward Aldrin, her resolve unshaken despite the recent chaos. "Let us finish what we began," she said firmly. Aldrin nodded, lifting the ancient crown once more. "Princess Valeth Dracarai, by the authority vested in this convocation, and the will of your people, I now crown you Empress of the Dracarai dynasty." The crown settled gently upon Valeth's head, and the chamber erupted into genuine, unrestrained applause, the earlier chaos quickly forgotten amid the historic significance of the moment. Valeth turned to face her assembled empire, newly crowned, resolve and quiet strength radiating clearly from her composed features. "People of this empire," she began, her voice carrying clearly and confidently across the silent chamber, "today marks not only my coronation, but the beginning of a new understanding for us all. Strength is not measured solely by bloodline or tradition, but by courage, loyalty, and genuine connection between hearts, regardless of where those hearts first began beating." She turned toward Elias, extending her hand toward him with clear, deliberate intention. "It is with great pride, and even greater love, that I present to you all my chosen consort, Elias Reyes, a man whose courage and unwavering devotion have already proven invaluable, both to myself and to the future stability of this entire empire." Elias stepped forward, taking her hand firmly, his own quiet resolve evident as he faced the assembled crowd. Genuine applause erupted throughout the chamber, the earlier skepticism and quiet hostility finally giving way entirely to widespread acceptance and admiration. Even Lyra Ashworth, watching from among the assembled nobles, applauded enthusiastically, a genuine smile lighting her youthful features. Nearby, Mira exchanged a relieved, satisfied glance with Kestor, both silently acknowledging the successful conclusion to weeks of careful, dangerous preparation. As the ceremony concluded and celebrations began throughout the city below, Valeth and Elias finally found a quiet moment alone upon a private balcony, overlooking the jubilant crowds gathered across Threnholm's shimmering towers. "We did it," Elias said softly, still marveling slightly at how far they had come since that quiet morning on a distant hillside. "We did," Valeth agreed, leaning gently against him as fireworks began lighting the night sky in celebration. "Though I suspect our true journey together has only just begun." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Elias replied, wrapping his arm gently around her as they watched the celebration unfold below. Far below, the Empire celebrated the beginning of a new era, one built not merely upon ancient bloodlines and rigid tradition, but upon genuine courage, unwavering loyalty, and a bond powerful enough to bridge the impossible distance between two entirely different worlds. And as the stars emerged fully overhead, stretching endlessly across the vast, familiar darkness, Valeth and Elias stood quietly together, ready to face whatever challenges still awaited them, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it exactly as they had faced everything before, together, unshaken and unafraid.